Every week, Hillsdale College President Larry P. Arnn joins Hugh Hewitt to discuss great books, great men, and great ideas. This is the Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. Also at the Hillsdale College Podcast Network, check out the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour, the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, The Larry P. Arnn Show, and more, all at podcast.hillsdale.edu.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That music means we are into the Hillsdale Dialogue, the last radio hour of the week, with our friend Dr. Larry Arnn, the president of Hillsdale College. All things Hillsdale are at hillsdale.edu, including the applications you need to get into the Lantern of the North, and all the video courses for adults and undergraduates alike across the country. And HughforHillsdale.com gives you all of the Hillsdale Dialogues, getting close to 850 of them back many years. Dr. Arnn, Happy New Year. I have not seen you yet this year. I hope your 2024 is off to a good start.
Good, yeah. The world's falling apart and the college is strong.
Well, we got to have a readout to go back to. We need a bunker, so we'll just head to Hillsdale. Dr. Arnn, this week we're going to talk about Iowa and politics. We'll return to Winston Churchill and World War I next week, specifically to the Battle of the Marne and to the Battle of Antwerp over the next 2 weeks. But let's begin with Iowa. Your reaction to what was an avalanche win by the former president in the state to your south.
Well, it's, first of all, massive strength, right? He did great. Trump did great. The others, so it's narrowed down to 3 now. Ramaswamy pulled out today. So it's going to be Haley is showing strength in the news reports say in New Hampshire, but we don't really know very much about that, right? Trump is amazingly strong. And the puzzle is he strong enough to spread his wings and go beyond a base that is by far the largest base in the Republican Party and in the country, I think. I think if you take the people who are very loyal to Donald Trump, that's the largest group in either party. And, the question in the race, in all presidential races, but this one in particular, is going to be, can he get more? Can anybody get more? And, right now you'd have to guess if some Republican can do it, it's probably Trump. But, that's Iowa is an interesting state. They do it by caucus. They get together and talk and vote at the end of an evening. And the results come in pretty fast. And he did, better than anybody since the 1980s, I read. And, this is, and think of the man, right? There are felony counts against him by the dozen. And I myself do not regard them as anything except a political witch hunt, but they're serious and they're going on. And I think that increases his strength among a large part of his base because people resent that, these efforts to keep him off the ballot in Colorado and Maine and other places. That means somebody else gets to decide who we get to choose for president, and that somebody else is in the government. And that's very bad. So
you often quote
That's Iowa.
Winston Churchill saying, as his father did before him, trust the people. It seems to me that the Colorado Supreme Court and the Maine Secretary of State, like the networks on Monday night, which would not carry the former president's victory speech, they do not trust the people. They want to manipulate the people. And I think that's going to build up a tremendous blowback that is apolitical. It's got nothing to do with Trump.
Yeah,
Trump has strengths, but I think people are mad about this.
In the mainstream media, they love to talk about a fever in the country. That people are very alarmed and people are extreme, domestic terrorism. Comparing to what goes on in America by Americans with what Hamas did in Israel on October the 7th is unreal, but they do. And they talk about that fever, but they've got a fever too, right? They function as exponents of a kind of government. And we have two kinds in America now. We have a centralized, rule-driven system that has all three powers of government united in, it's not, we haven't simply discarded the separation of powers because it goes issue by issue and department by department. If you're at the EPA or if you're at the Department of Education or if you're at any of the government departments, you have the power to make laws and you have the power to enforce the laws, and you have the power to adjudicate disputes under the laws in the first instance. And that's all three powers, and they exercise it not over the whole of government, but they exercise it over their subject matter, which are big, right? There's, the government is roughly half the economy now, putting it all together. And I think in recent years, one of the things we've seen is that increasingly it functions as one. There's a kind of a zeitgeist, and the media and the big corporations. So, I think that there's a kind of a ruling class in America.
There is, and they will not put up with people who will not put up with that. And I want to come back to, it's one of my fundamental takeaways from the Iowa example. But last week, I talked with your dean in Washington, D.C., about the fact that I do not believe that Harvard can be repaired, and that we just have to replace elite institutions with people like Hillsdale and those who want to be like Hillsdale. Then on the weekend, I was at a Ken Williams event, your old friend in Orange County. You're very popular out here. They haven't seen you in a while, so you're popular. And they are coming out to celebrate your Orange County Classical Academy, which is a Hillsdale curriculum course, and they're all singing Larry Arnn's praises. And I said, well, I talk to him every week. But they are very worried in California that the state will destroy charter school. The last breath, the last chance for people to get a real education. And I think Americans are alarmed by this, the collapse of elite institutions into mediocrity and the refusal to allow elite institutions, genuine ones, to rise. Do you agree with me?
Oh, yeah. I think education has become the most promising issue in America. Because, look, the people who run public education, remember, in public education, it's huge. There's hundreds of thousands of schools. There's 100,000 schools, I think. It's huge, but more than half the employees in the schools are not teachers. And it proceeds by rules made distant from the classroom. And there's no need for that, right? It's not rocket science. Education is not rocket science until it becomes rocket science, which is later, right, in college. And not even that for everybody, although at Hillsdale everybody has to study that. So it's a centralized system. And it's not that the people who do it are not intelligent people. Most of them are, although I think the ed departments to which they go are not particularly intelligent and have become famous for having said that. And so the trouble with it is it's centralized. It's hard to do that, right? You can't, I run a pretty big institution. And I know better than to try to teach every class and make rules for every action. In fact, every year I pride myself that there are fewer rules at Hillsdale College than there were the year before. And that's because you don't govern people like that. Goals are better. I used to argue, the Republicans have been guilty of this. Centralizing education, believing in standardization, believing in high-stakes testing. And I would argue with certain famous Republicans, now retired, and good people, too, very good people I admire. And they would say, but what accountability will there be? And I would say, well, parents, on the average, are fond of their children and sacrifice hugely, or else... By the way, in all cases, some adult is sacrificing for a young child, or else the child will die. And so then they say, but how can the parents know if the children are learning? And I would say, can you hear yourself talk? You think it's hard to tell if a kid can read or not? I have intelligent children. I married above myself. And once my children were in a room, we were having a little reception, cocktail party at my house in California, and there were two school teachers in the room. And my elder daughter, now a PhD, started reading to the other children. And my wife and I didn't pay any attention, but the conversation stopped. Everybody, they looked and they said, wow, she can really read. Well, sure she can. She's made to. If you can talk, you can learn to read, and you can learn to read fast, right? So the point is, what they think is high-stakes testing devised by bureaucratic forces far from the classroom is the only way to know.
And it's so wrong, and it has upset so many Americans. And that did play into the Iowa caucuses, and we're going to come back and talk about how on this Hillsdale Dialogue, all things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. Become a subscriber to Imprimis and a supporter of the college. It is the lantern of the North, and we need it. Stay tuned.
Hey, it's Scott Bertram, and I've got a challenge for you today. Become a better educated American citizen. And to help you do just that, we at Hillsdale College have our free online courses available for all who wish to learn. Our challenge? Take just one of our courses. There are so many to choose from. You can discover the beauty of the Bible in the Genesis story, study the writings of C.S. Lewis, or explore the true meaning of America in Constitution 101. We have dozens more to choose from, and all these self-paced free courses feature Hillsdale faculty and scholars, many you've heard on this podcast. So visit hillsdale.edu/course, COURSE, and pick one of the more than 30 free Hillsdale courses. I hope you'll accept my challenge. Pick whichever course you like and become a more educated citizen today. Go to hillsdale.edu/course, COURSE. That's hillsdale.edu/course.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt. The Hillsdale Dialogue is underway, last radio hour of the week. Dr. Arnn, you were the target of a New York Times hit piece, the Hillsdale College was. I'm not going to get into it. I just want to point out that American elite media has decided that you are a threat. The New Yorker's done this, the New York Times, other people. Why do you think they are so threatened by little Hillsdale College in Michigan?
Well, a lot of the fault is in this show. The New York Times article quotes from things I've said on this show. And he's probably listening now, I don't know. But first of all, Hillsdale College, what do we do, right? Today is the first day of classes for the second term of academic year 2024. I was teaching yesterday afternoon, and I'm teaching again on Friday. That's what we do. And there's a bunch of 18-year-olds to 21-year-olds, and they show up here, and what we do is study and talk and think. We don't encourage student activism. On this argument, which I like to make in my terms, I always say, you're too young and ignorant to save the world. You better learn first. Because there's great things to read, you know. So that's what we do, and we do it well. You know, the standards are high, and our kids go on to top graduate schools and professional schools of all kinds, and you know, it's hard to get in here. And the reason it's good that it's hard to get in here is that you have to make a commitment to work and toward the goals of the college, which are age old, right? Well, that's spreading, right? It's good
Yes.
here, and you know, it's a joy to do. You know, we have 60 or 70,000 visitors a year to our campus, and they can walk around and look at what they want to, and they, you know, most professors let them into class freely. Almost all, I do. You have to be good when you're in class, no matter who you are. But and so it's an open place, right? You walk around, talk, and say what you want to. People are not afraid. We have a speech rule here. It's age old. You can say what you want to if you can say it in a civil and academic manner. And that means calling for the death of the race of your fellow students is not allowed at Hillsdale College. But there's no real enforcement of that. You know, they've all accepted the goals of the institution, which are necessary to form any kind of community. Well, now it's spreading across the country. In this good article you wrote about the future, you mentioned somewhere that Imprimis has 2 million subscribers. It does not. I was told yesterday it's just about to cross 7 million.
Oh, my gosh.
No,
That's a minor error on my part. 7 million?
Well, you know, a million here, a million there. Who's to quibble? And, we pay the bills and we don't charge for it, right? You can have it if you want to. And if you don't like it, you can write us a dirty letter and we'll read the letter. But, and you can cancel if you like. And
but it's free.
So
that's incredible.
Free. And then, these charter schools, right? We just started with a simple premise. You can't be good at a million things. You can be good at one, maybe, if you're lucky. And if you pick a hard thing like education, you should really focus on it. And so we think that we know something about education, and we do it and pass the test of being pretty good at it on a daily basis. God, pray we can continue.
And now I have a theory I want to test on you. I believe that mediocrity is threatened mortally by excellence, and that you are excellent, Hillsdale College, not you. I'm not going to give you that, but Hillsdale College is excellent, and mediocrity cannot hide in the light that excellence sheds.
You mentioned the charter schools. There's more than 100 of them now. And remember, we don't take any money from the government, and that means these charter schools, we have 24, some number of people working on that full time now. It's expensive for us. None of the money comes from the schools. People have given us money for it. They don't get anything back, the people who give the money. They know what the schools are for, and people are fond of children and want the society to do well and want kids to learn. And so there's where the force is, right? And these 24 people, 100 schools, you can do the division, how many per school. That's the bureaucracy. That's the equivalent of the United States Department of Education and the state bureaucracies.
And that is a mortal threat to bureaucrats. We're going to come back and talk about that. Everything that you do is a mortal threat to everything that is currently dominant. And that's why Hillsdale is in the target.
And it's growing. If it was, and, I often apologize to the faculty about things written about us. And, there's 3 or 4 a week now. I always say, we've had a terrible misfortune. We've become significant. I wish we had.
Successful and excellent. I'll be right back. Dr. Larry Arnn, all things Hillsdale. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. The Hillsdale Dialogue is underway. Earlier this week, Donald Trump won a sweeping victory in Iowa, and I'm discussing it today with Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. All of our previous dialogues are collected at hughforhillsdale.com. We've been doing this for a lot of years, and we usually will talk about Churchill, Lincoln, Plato, Aristotle, the Old Testament, the New Testament. You name it, we've done it except Hume, because I can't get through Hume. But maybe we'll do Hume someday. Dr. Arnn, this week, though, I want to remind people, Hillsdale is nonpartisan. You do not involve yourself in partisan politics, but you do observe, and you're very close to Iowa. Donald Trump won every demographic, every age group, every educational attainment group, every income status, every ethnicity in Iowa. He particularly won evangelicals, and this surprised people. I had a theory which I'll test out with you. Then I want to test out with you Rachel Maddow's theory. My theory is that Donald Trump won evangelicals not because they believe, as the Washington Post asserted, that he is ordained by God. There is a small group of people who believe that, but because evangelicals, like most Americans, have a very, very advanced sense of fair play and justice, and that what is going on with Donald Trump in the New York State proceeding, in the Manhattan criminal proceeding, in the Atlanta criminal proceeding, in the Florida criminal proceeding, in the civil proceeding in New York on defamation, in the Colorado Supreme Court, and in the state of Maine is not fair. And that evangelicals especially, but Americans generally, resent not fair. In other words, that we have due process built into our Anglo-American justice heart. What do you think of my theory?
Yeah, I think, another way to put it, which I've been putting for some years, is people have become fearful about their government, and with good reason, right? And it's just a fact that the only America is, when it was founded, it was unique. And one of the features of uniqueness, it's in the 63rd Federalist by James Madison, is that the only way we are the people, the constitutional majority, which Lincoln calls the only true sovereign of a free people, is we have sovereignty. It's not in the government. They don't get to do anything that we, the governed, do not say. But we just have one mechanism for controlling the government, and that is elections. And elections are fiddled with a lot, more than ever, right? And election laws need to be stable so people can have confidence in them. And we've been changing them a lot, right? And as a rule, well, in the 2020 election, they were changed mostly in the executive branch alone. And that means there's no check and balance. I mean, it's an inconvenient fact that the Constitution of the United States names the state legislatures. And that means not the governor and not the judges in the state to be the sole authority on the manner of choosing the electors. And in the name of the pandemic, that was altered in many states, and it was altered in the executive branch alone, which by definition is controlled by one party. And so that's fishy, right? And you have to suspect that. And then when that happens, and then these other, and see, I don't know. You know, people say, was the 2020 election stolen? The answer is, I don't know. I just know that they altered it in ways that are suspect. And if it's true that Trump is a rank partisan who will do anything for power and will ultimately threaten the American democracy, well, that argument cuts both ways because there's politicians in the other party, too.
Well, this brings me to Rachel Maddow on Monday night. And I don't think I've ever played Rachel Maddow for Larry Arnn. This is a first. I did it for Senator Tom Cotton on Tuesday, and he was mad at me because he'd never heard Rachel Maddow before. But I think you need to hear what they're saying on the far fringe of the left. Fundamental things are afoot. Cut number 4.
Again, the big picture takeaway from that, and I don't mean to be, again, too dark, as you said, on this, but it is not. If we are worried about the rise of authoritarianism in this country, we are worried about potential rise of fascism in this country. If we're worried about our democracy falling to an authoritarian and potentially fascist form of government, the leader who is trying to do that is part of that equation. Mm-hmm. But people wanting that is a much bigger part of that equation. Right. And the American electorate is made up of two major parties. One of those parties has been flirting with extremism on the ultra-right for a very long time. They've brought them in a way that they haven't been central to Republican electoral politics ever before, and I know because I've been studying this. But
all right, let me stop there. Larry, you and I have been studying Republican politics for a long time, and I remember sitting down with Richard Nixon in his office in San Clemente in 1978, talking about the 1964 election, and he was saying, you know, you can't win without the Goldwater people, but you can't win with just the Goldwater people. Rachel Maddow does not know anything about the Republican Party, and there is no threat of authoritarianism. There is no threat of dictatorship. There is a constitution in the way. And what is wrong with these people that they have no faith in our Constitution?
Well, you know, and I like that verb flirting, right? What does that even mean?
It means nothing. Yes.
Lincoln was accused of flirting with the know-nothings who were, you know, a little crazy back in the day. And he never spoke of them except to denounce them. And it, you know, I mean, one must not use violence in politics except as a last resort. But the Declaration of Independence itself is testimony that one may, but very reluctantly, and we're a long way from that, right? And the only way we would get there is foreign conquest or elections becoming dominated by the people who are in power. And there's danger of that, I think. But it's not here yet. We're going to have.
I think we are in a 1968. I have not said this to you before. I think we've entered into a 1968 situation where violence from the left is a reality in Chicago at their convention, because we've seen it in the anti-Israel and the anti-Semitic explosion, which has left me. I haven't talked to you since this happened. the explosion of anti-Semitism on campuses at the end of 2023 and the beginning of 2024, the meltdown of the college presidents, the marches, the attacks on Jews, the murder of a Jewish man in Los Angeles. It's stuff we've never seen before, but it's all from the left, Dr. Arnn.
Yeah. And, it's shocking, right, what's happening. The two Ivy League presidents lost their jobs, and that's because they couldn't bring themselves to condemn loud calls for the destruction of an entire race repeatedly, to the disruption of the operation of the campus on the most famous universities in America. That's crazy. And that was provoked, or the occasion for it, let's say, was a bunch of terrorists went across a border and killed a bunch of babies. If somebody, we argue about everything at Hillsdale College, and we try to get to the facts of the situation. And they don't, those people at Harvard and Penn and those places, they apparently don't really know anything about the history of the Middle East. And for some strange reason, they are not appalled by the murder of babies. And that's what happened. And they did video.
It is the first pogrom of our lifetime. You studied with the great Dr. Martin Gilbert, who wrote The Great History of Israel, and it is preceded by a century of pogroms in Russia and Eastern Europe that led many people to flee, even before the First World War, to the Palestinian, Ottoman Palestine, and then to the Mandate. But we've never seen it before, and it's blood-curdling, Dr. Arnn. It's barbaric. It's depraved.
It's that's right, and it's a death culture, right? I mean, the head of Hamas gives this speech, right, in the aftermath, right? At first, the world is mostly shocked and appalled by that. And for, a good 4 days, the protesters against Israel were relatively quiet. And in that period, in the horror of what was seen with video and audio, the head of Hamas said, we're going to keep doing this. We're going to do this all over the world.
Again and again and again and again. That's a direct quote. And that's wicked. And we don't call it that. And we should, right? And it would have been easy. It would have been easy to do so. That's why I think, to steal your phrase, fundamental things are afoot in this election. We're going to come back and talk about New Hampshire next week after the break. But fundamental things are afoot. And this 10-7 has, to me, shocked me in a way that I think it's going to alter the axis of politics in America fundamentally. Because if you can't recognize how evil that was, you're disqualified from public life. Do you agree with me on that?
Yeah, with the caveat that nobody really has the power to disqualify one.
Oh, the main Secretary of State.
Yeah, there you go. That's right. Well, so the point is, that's outside the boundary, right? And
yes.
It should be called that. That should be called that. And,
I'll be right back with Dr. Larry Arnn, all things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu.
Hello, this is Kyle Mernon, Director of Online Learning here at Hillsdale College, and I have some great news. We brought Hillsdale's popular free online courses to the Hillsdale College Podcast Network, and our next series is one of my favorites. It's the Genesis story, Reading Biblical Narratives, and it's taught by Justin A. Jackson, Professor of English here at Hillsdale College, and our President, Larry P. Arnn. After listening to all 6 episodes, you'll have a deeper and more enriching understanding of the Bible. The Hillsdale College Online Courses podcast, hosted by me and my colleague Juan Davalos, expands Hillsdale's mission to provide all who wish to learn the education necessary to preserve civil and religious liberty in America. And we want you to be part of it at podcast.hillsdale.edu. You can subscribe now to the Hillsdale College Online Courses podcast and hear new episodes every week with additional commentary and insights from our team. Go to podcast.hillsdale.edu to learn more. That's podcast.hillsdale.edu. Thanks for listening.
Welcome back, America. I've been talking about Iowa and American politics with Dr. Arnn. Every 3 or 4 weeks, I make him do a public event, current events thing. He hates it. He'd rather talk about Churchill or Plato. But Dr. Arnn, on Tuesday, New Hampshire votes, a lot of people have put a lot of effort. You and I know political people, when they get involved in a campaign for Governor DeSantis or Ambassador Haley or former President Trump or Vivek Ramaswamy, they put their heart and soul into it, and they are the lifeblood of American politics, and they are citizens. This is not over, but it does seem to me to be a very high hill to climb. What do you think is going to happen in New Hampshire?
Well, Churchill predicted New Hampshire perfectly. The future, though imminent, is obscure. So I don't know.
Neither do I.
You know, and yeah, every kind of thing is said, right? It's so here's it. It's a fair prediction that a thesis is going to be tested. The anti-Trump thesis is that he lost enough formerly Republican votes in the suburbs to offset his expansion of the base among working people, and that's why Joe Biden won. That's a thesis, and it, I don't know, might be true. It's hard, right? Exit poll data is not perfect, and it takes the kind of study that one would have to do that I have not done.
Particularly in the environment of 2020, which was categorically and undeniably different from any previous or future election.
We didn't vote the same way, right?
Correct.
And that's a big change. And, maybe, first of all, it ought to be easy for citizens to vote once. Now, think about that. That means that you're going to have some controls on it. Like the dead should not be heavily represented in the voter rolls. And there's just notorious examples of that happening in America in the past, right? And so if it happened in the past, it could happen again. And powerful people who like to win in both parties have an interest in that. So what did they do? Well, the Zuckerberg boxes, right? But, apparently Mark Zuckerberg gave $400 million to a bunch of localities, and they made it much more convenient to vote in localities where there was heavy Democratic vote, and the turnout was bigger. Now, I'll just tell you, I don't know the truth of that. I don't. It's hard to find that out, and that's not what I do for a living. But the point, what I focus on is something that's not hard to know, and that is whatever is done in elections should be done fairly along partisan lines so people are all equally getting a chance. And, and getting a chance is not the same thing. Because, Churchill's one of the most beautiful things he said. Churchill's, you quoted him, trust the people, right? He did do that all his life. And he said once, in the middle of the Second World War, when life was at stake for his whole country, he said, the power of this country is the little man. Women were voting at the time, but man, we used to say, when we said man, we meant people. In the booth alone, deciding the fate of the nation. Well, is the little man in the booth alone anymore?
I'll close with this. On most days in California, I walk through a park, a rather remote park that is home to a playground and to a recreation center, but there is at one end of the park a big ballot drop-off box that has been there for 3 years. It ought not to be there. It's not located well. It's not lit well. It's removed from public observation. It is not how we vote in America, but it's still there.
In other words, it's simple. It should be easy for the citizen to vote once. And the fact that there's some inconvenience in voting, because, what if you have to get your laundry? And it's almost instant. Almost instant is not the same thing as instant. There should not be any hesitation that people should be encouraged to take a little trouble and think about it, because it's a serious thing, right? We should raise our children about the duties of citizenship, and they include being informed.
This is why you're going to get another New York Times article about you. If you're talking about raising good citizens, you're really a radical now, Dr. Arnn, and we're going to have to.
I'm sorry, I can't. Try though we might. I'm afraid that we're not going to get along very well with those people, and see, a happy day for me is that if I don't pay any attention to them.
I know. That's why you're unhappy talking to me. But you'll be back next week, and we're going to be talking about the Marne. Because Richard, our friend Richard, we are finally at the Battle of the Marne on World War I next week, America. Do not miss it. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Dr. Arnn will be back. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. Thank you, Harley. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, General Ishmael. Have a great weekend, America.
Thanks for listening to the Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. For more information about Hillsdale College, head to hillsdale.edu.